If you are a birth professional, I'm really glad that you're here. I'd like to start a birth community wide conversation on essential oils because this is really a part of American birth culture that's here to stay. Unadvised maternal oil use in birth is a challenge for midwives and for doulas that is growing. And a lot of birth professionals think that essential oils are too potent for unprofessional use in birth. Yet, at the same time, there's kind of this sense where we're concerned they're going to fail us if they're ever challenged by a serious condition. We somehow think medicine when we think of essential oils, even though we're not allowed to say that. Yet, we also think of healthcare professionals who disapprove. This course explores these dichotomies, as well as the shift that's occurring in American health culture away from this pharmaceutical crisis that we're having of synthetic, patented symptom treatment in a professional context to a plant based healing culture that's pursued as a lifestyle. I want to talk about the philosophy of aromatherapy. This is something that's really important for birth professionals to understand because increasingly mothers who value natural solutions, self education, freedom, and healthcare choices are the type of mothers who are more likely to seek out midwifery and doula care, as well as oils at their birth. At Brilliant Birth Academy, we go a little bit wider than other academies because we want to prepare our students to be leading voices in the strategic institutions that are making real choices in our field. And so we do speak to things at a cultural and political and economic level. And so today I want to look at this therapeutic range of oil use in birth because as birthing mothers increasingly believe that their lifestyle choices, they want to make lifestyle choices that support their well being in a way that symptom management or even urgent care couldn't replace. A lot of these mothers feel that essential oils are an irreplaceable part of them taking educated responsibility for their health. But there's a disconnect. Why are there so many oil caused adverse reactions happening in birth, even for experienced oil users? At Brilliant Birth Academy, we believe, and many other professionals in the field believe, that it's because the therapeutic range of safe and effective oil use in birth is more conservative from commonly accepted aromatherapy standards. And when you come into a depth of a field of knowledge and you're playing with and reorganizing and making different categories of large volumes of information, you can start to get perspective shifts and categories of things, and you start to play with information in unique and dynamic ways and come up with new solutions for different things. And there are a few people who are aromatherapists who are really doing that at that level and who have a complex understanding of how individual essential oils work, how the body and absorption rates work, what is the timeline for each unique oil, and how might you prepare ahead of time for birth in order to make sure that that ginger is affecting the mom at the time of transition and it's not going to kick in 30 minutes later. How do you appropriately dose a mom who's in labor who has elevated rates of absorption because of a whole host of factors? How do you alter essential oil use in order to take care of the unique and highly sensitive physiology of a newborn who's transitioning from life inside the womb to life outside of the womb? These are all things that aren't being taught anywhere else. They're ways of thinking that very advanced aromatherapists are going after, but I'd really like to see an insurgence of a field-wide engagement at this higher level from birth professionals because the birth professionals have key insights and wisdom to bring to this table, but they're not being invited to the table by a few select people. And I think that we should open up that conversation. So even though there are a lot of people who are trained in aromatherapy, the specific training for birth isn't something that is really being practiced community wide. And I would like to submit that it should be. I think we could have a more effective response from the birth community in the face of the growing demands of maternal oil use at birth. But in order to do that, I would like to take just a few minutes to explore the philosophy of aromatherapy and to illustrate why I believe that the response, well, essential oil use is only appropriate for a certified aromatherapist. Only a mother should only use oils under the direction of a certified aromatherapist. I would like to explore why that is not a solution that has been working and some of the reasons why, the philosophical underpinnings of why that isn't landing with a lot of moms in doula and midwifery care, and how we can be more sensitive to these moms' cultural values and their philosophy in order to bring a solution that's culturally fits with what their value system is. Now, I'm going to be speaking very broadly and generically. This isn't like a lot of times, especially in liberal philosophy, you speak for your category. So if you're a black person, you like speak for all black people or something weird like that. I don't totally understand how this works. And you're not allowed to speak for other categories that you're not. That's not what this is. I'm not speaking for anybody. I'm not claiming that everybody who uses oils thinks this way. We're mostly just doing a thought exercise to generally pursue as just generally pursue a cultural sensitivity and maybe a perspective that's diverse from yours, but just examining how do people who use oils tend to think, and why is this message of you can only use these oils under the direction of a certified aromatherapist, why is that a conversation that feels like it's not breaking through for them or it's not meeting their needs? So let's look at aromatherapy's belief structure. Every practice of medicine, there are no exceptions to this. Every practice of medicine has a philosophy, it has a belief system about what the nature or state of unwellness is and what the state or nature of health is, what causes these states, and how a person may change their state from illness to health. Aromatherapy is no different. One of my favorite textbooks is Medical Aromatherapy, and Kirk asks, what brings people to aromatherapy? What exactly is it that stimulates many mothers to try and care for their children with natural means, often with aromatherapy? What is it that makes people take to aromatherapy immediately? How is aromatherapy different from conventional medicine? How is aromatherapy different from alternative modalities? The answers to these questions begins with a realization that aromatherapy is a dynamic process, not a static system of prescribing medicines. Aromatherapy can initiate the first steps on a journey that will ultimately lead to becoming a master of one's own health. If there is one concept that is the foundation of a practice of aromatherapy at a philosophical or cultural level, it's what he just said. So many people will talk about a journey of transformation that goes from dependence to independence, and from dependence in a state of unwellness to independence in a state of health. Today, the substances that we have that we apply to our bodies when we're in a state of unwellness, we have natural, multi-component plant-based medicine, and then we have synthetic products that are based on natural products, but you can't patent a natural product. If you have a very smart child, I would advise you to put them in science, because we are going to have a morality crisis in science in the next coming decades, as so many people are genetically modifying and making synthetic versions of what we see in nature. Instead of an organic technology, we are seeing an incredible level of profane disconfigurations of natural products. And we see this in the medical industry, where you're not allowed to patent a natural product. So they make a synthetic version. They take one active ingredient, and it's a single component active ingredient. They can prove how it works. And even with really seemingly benign things, even some shocking over-the-counter things, we're now saying, oh gosh, that actually isn't safe. Just kidding. And so many people will talk about this generically. Others of us have lost family members to this crisis. My mother-in-law, who was a nurse, overdosed on a prescription medication 4 days after the birth of her grandson, my son. And postpartum bonding in the wake of a sudden death of a family member, and funeral planning is just, I remember pumping right before I went, to speak. I was the speaker at her funeral. And this is a very personal issue for many, many people who have lost family members to deaths because of synthetic medicines that we have. So another quote from same author, different textbooks, The Healing Intelligence of Essential Oils. He says the initial impulse to learn about aromatherapy almost always turns to a dynamic process. And this is almost always pursued as a rejection of a medical philosophy that sees people as being unqualified to take care of their own health. And so it's a dynamic process that a lot of people feel that they're on. So let's look at this dynamic process of many essential oil users. The first perspective is that many of these people believe themselves to be an expert on their health or illness. They believe that their personal experience gives them a weight of testimony or a measure of authority that they feel is a relevant perspective in the diagnosis or treatment of whatever it is that their state is. They take an incredibly high degree of personal responsibility for their health journey, and they do frequent personal assessments of well-being. So they'll notice, wow, I start to get really grouchy if I dip under 8 hours of sleep. If I drink less than 6 glasses of water, I don't feel well. They're constantly doing frequent personal assessments of their well-being, and they believe that they are qualified and capable to do that. Next, they believe in the possibility of a communal stewardship of health information. They believe that health is part of the natural human experience and that this is something that we all need to be thinking and talking about and pursuing collectively as a community. They pursue personal research. They value a diversity of voices. They don't exclude people from the table. They don't tell people that their experience isn't relevant. They believe in increasing communal knowledge and awareness. They believe that that's valuable. So no one information source needs to be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Grassroots information from the bottom up is perceived to be as valuable as top-down information. People with this perspective make constant adjustments to their health protocols as a part of an ongoing lifestyle improvement culture. So they're constantly upgrading their health. They don't need a huge disaster event in their life to start walking a little bit more. When you study the blue zones in the world, the people who are happiest and live longest, they don't sit for 8 hours a day and then pump iron for an hour. They walk. They walk with their neighbors. They have all of these constant small choices that they make as a part of an ongoing lifestyle improvement. We know what makes people live longer, and it's this philosophy. Okay, I just went ahead and said it. It's this type of personal responsibility for their health. So people who take responsibility for their health journey, this includes frequent assessments. It includes communal input from elders, from people who are wise, from people who have been on the same health journey. It includes constant micro and macro adjustments to increase natural well-being. And lastly, they view conventional medical care as a valuable and yet ultimately secondary resource that's often only sought in emergency or severe illness. So people with this type of mindset would be looking for birth professionals to support them, and they see themselves as being the expert in their birth, that their body has intuitive intelligence on how to align the maternal and fetal spine, how to open with contractions. They believe that their ability to move might be more important than electronic fetal monitoring. It's not that there's these harsh dichotomies, but in general, they're looking to sources within themselves for their health and well-being rather than to external sources. So let's look at an alternative perspective. Again, I'm not claiming to speak for anyone or that everyone falls only into these neat two categories, but just for the sake of a thought experiment, we're just speaking generally about two different opinions that I'm perhaps even exaggerating a little bit for illustration's sake. So the alternative perspective values certifications and credentials as the main legitimate source of being an expert on health. If you ever want to really see this in action, look at the dialogue threads between a mom who says something like, my fourth child, who is 18 months old, had 17 vaccinations and died 48 hours later, and the doctors ruled it SIDS. And see what people's response is to her thought, her expertise as a mother when they don't have that system of thought that we just went through. They would say, well, the person who's the expert, the person who diagnosed it, is the person who is the only really legitimate source of who's able to make that diagnosis. So if they said it's SIDS, then it's SIDS. And you see an incredible discrediting of the experiences of vaccine injured people. So if you really want to see this played out, I would say that that's a place where you can see, and that's not to criticize. All of us do this. So when you have a worldview, if there is information that comes in that challenges that whole system of thought, the brain actually disregards it as irrelevant information. And you see this not only at a thought level, but visually. We now have unbelievable proof that visually you can see something. It doesn't have to even be at the level of abstraction of ideas. If there's this video online where they say, count the number of times a basketball is passed between players in a white shirt and players in a black shirt. And so you count, and at the end, you're very proud of yourself. You say, the ball was passed 16 times. And the video says, great, but did you notice the moonwalking gorilla? And you're like, what? And they rewind, and a moonwalking gorilla comes in the middle of the basketball players and dances for like a minute. And the first time you watch the video, you do not see the gorilla. Sorry if I just ruined that for you. But the brain, because it has a task, is disregarding that information. And so your brain will disregard information that you don't see as relevant in your system philosophy. And that is the reason why when a doula or a midwife says to a mother, you can only take oils prescribed by someone who has a certification, that is information I've heard constantly from doulas that they are so exasperated with the moms because they will say this to the moms and they're like, it's like they're not hearing me. I want to affirm your experience. They're actually not. They're actually not hearing you because they believe themselves to be an expert on their health. So let's look at another alternative perspective. The alternative perspective really sees a person who has an alternative perspective would see themselves as being dependent or requiring professional evaluation to diagnose health or illness. So they don't have any sense of ongoing protocols. They mostly, when they're sick enough to go to the doctor, they have a professional evaluation and a diagnosis and then a treatment. So the idea that you would use substances medicinally, but not really for any specific thing, just to increase general wellness, isn't something that they're really comfortable with. They feel like it's too casual. This is something that they might not really understand. Someone with this alternative believes health information is too complex to be understood and appropriately applied by uncertified people. They also, and this is very strong, they tend to believe that motivations for investing in others' health, particularly with supplying products, giving information, is predatory at lower levels of education and status, but not at higher levels. So hierarchy is very important in this worldview. So if you have more credentials, you're less predatory and more accurate, which is interesting to me because is a mother of 4 who's trying to sell essential oils to make enough money for groceries more predatory, and she's trying to make $500 a month with Young Living or doTERRA? Is she more predatory than a multi-million-dollar corporation that has a $4.9 million deficit if they don't push this synthetic drug, in the next, 3 months, they have to sell that many millions of dollars of it? Anyone who's doing anything at a high level, or really almost anyone who's doing anything at all, there's almost always a profit motivation. But this particular worldview, because they do really value that hierarchy and that higher level of credentials, they see investing in others' health information or an invitation to buy a product, they see that as being very predatory at lower levels, and they really don't want to see that activity until you go higher up in the hierarchy of education and being credentialed. They also want information that's 100% accurate, that's complete instructions, and it has to be completely safe. And this is because of the patient's inability to recognize misinformation. And also because when you're in a hierarchy, your reputation is on the line. So everything has to be buttoned up, perfect, the right information. So that's information accuracy is really important in that alternative perspective. Next, a professional diagnosis of a specific and usually a serious condition are necessary before health habits are altered. We already touched on this a little bit. So the idea of just micro adjustments is really foreign to this alternative culture. And lastly, they believe that medical and pharmaceutical industries and the government should have a large role in their health journey. So they tend to be very pro free healthcare. Uh, they believe that they need professional informational sources that are not predatory. They believe that they need professional diagnosis and professional treatment options, which usually include synthetic medications. They depend on these resources in order to remedy illness. And when they are not responding to major illness, when it is about wellness, again, it's prescription level, certified professional. They're very serious about keeping their flu shot appointments and are very pro vaccination. And they keep those wellness appointments and believe in baby well, healthcare checkups, etc. So, as you can imagine, a mother who has hired a midwife or a doula with this type of philosophy to suddenly be told, you are not qualified to use plant-based plant-based natural solutions, that you need a diagnosis or you need a specific plan coming down from a certified aromatherapist, that information sources on the internet are not only not accurate and not good enough, but they're predatory and they're being given out by low level people, and and this is something that you really shouldn't let people speak into, but you need a professional, and you should only have a certified aromatherapist. That's something that is so foreign to their philosophy system, that what I've heard happening a couple times is that moms actually think, gosh, well, I thought that this midwife or this doula was here to support me, and it looks like they're not on the same page with my perspective at all. And so oftentimes you can have a professional fallout, to which then the doula or midwife says, gosh, this mom is just so brainwashed by these predatory, misinformed MLM schemes, and she's so brainwashed that, when I challenged her oil use, she just flipped out on me. And so you see really where there isn't this cultural sensitivity and tolerance, that there can really be a misunderstanding between oil using moms who have this type of aromatherapy philosophy and birth professionals. And so this is something I just wanted to present, because I think that a more effective response to essential oil use and birth, and again, we already said that mothers who value this type of philosophy are more likely to seek out birth professionals such as a doula or midwifery care, and to also be an oil user, that a more effective response isn't to try and take pieces of a foreign philosophy system, but to serve them uh, within their culture, to have like culturally sensitive care. And what I believe that could look like is birth professionals taking all of their wisdom on the hormonal progression of birth, how things progress in a normally progressing uncomplicated labor, on pain management techniques, on their sensitivity to the fact that the environment matters for the release of labor stimulating hormones, their perspectives on how to position the maternal body for that alignment of the maternal fetal spine, how to naturally deal with the effects of birth by stage. So early stage, second stage labor, when to cut off oil use to transition an oiled labor experience to a newborn safe birth experience, how to interact with oils in parts of, if you go to the top oil safety expert, they'll tell you to do a bath with oil, which essentially ends up with a layer of vegetable oil on the surface of the bath. Well, that's not only a fall hazard for a mom, but then you're getting oils potentially all over her body, especially her perineum, and that just makes transitioning the labor water experience to a birth appropriate state of getting all that oil off the mom just completely. It's just the methods of oils that we use in birth need to be much more conservative, less topical, and we need to be really careful about the oils that we're using, not to layer too many. These are things that are not being talked about at a wide level in the aromatherapy community because they are lacking the voice of birth professionals. And I really would love to see a conversation emerge at a culture wide level so that we can start serving moms more sensitive to their cultural values and to care for them in the context that their cultural values would really be welcome to. So most moms who have this cultural understanding just don't just aren't thinking at the level of I use oils all the time, but I am going to conscript a certified professional to write me up a ticket on which oils I need to use for my birth, and I'm going to pay them for that information because everything online is misinformed or whatever. That's not the way that they think, and that's what you believe isn't just necessarily what you say, it's what you do. And what we can see mothers doing is that they are not at a wide scale hiring aromatherapy consultation plans for their birth. What they are doing is they are hiring more and more doulas. They are hiring more and more midwifery care. These are areas that are expanding. And so, really, what you have is, I think, an incredible opportunity for the people who are already present at these births, which is the doulas and the midwives, to become well educated enough in oils just to keep themselves safe professionally and the mom safe from adverse reaction. I think at a minimum, that's something we can all agree that just having one person knowledgeable about oils in the room where oils are being used, who understand how oils and birth the sensitive things that you would need to know in order to masterfully handle that. I think that just that's something we should all be able to agree on, that safety training for oils would help reduce the number of adverse reactions caused in birth from maternal oil use. And beyond that, I think that an effective response to what we see in the market demands would be to invite birth professionals to the aromatherapy conversation. I think they have a lot of wisdom and insight to give. I've been listening to them for some time now. More people are starting to listen, and I would really like to see a development of birth specific aromatherapy trainings in order to meet this growing market demand that is culturally sensitive to what the majority of moms feel about their health journey and the way that they approach wellness in this sensitive time of birth. So, you guys are the experts. Leave me a comment below and let me know what thoughts you have, what questions you have for other professionals in your community, if you have insights or objections or different thoughts around the solutions for how we can care for moms in a way that is culturally sensitive to their belief system with health and unwellness, and specifically how that includes oils. Leave me a comment below and let me know. If you appreciate this video, I've also included a link for you to share that in the description of the video. So thank you so much for your attention. Please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next course.